Hi everybody, it's Mr. Marty. Well, it's not Sunday, it's actually Saturday morning at Starbucks. And Sundays are generally when I do my existential talks. But I wanted to just kind of start off with some discussions about existential, or not so much existentialism. But I want to pose a question. It's probably a question you've never thought about, but I have been thinking about this. So here's the question. Is the concept of an afterlife, heaven, hell, purgatory, celestial kingdom, telestial, whatever terms you want to use for life after death, the concept of life after death, I want to ask you a question. Is this a problem? Has it been a problem for us as a species, for humanity? Is the concept of an afterlife a problem? Well, many of you watching out there would say, what are you, crazy? Of course it's not a problem. It gives people comfort, and their loved ones pass, and they're told there's an afterlife, that they're going to see them in the afterlife, and this isn't a problem. This is wonderful. That's the common thinking, and it's a thought that I've been a party to, that I've shared for a number of years. Problem is, I'm rethinking that. I'm in the process of rethinking that, and I kind of want you to rethink that too. So first, let's start off with kind of a little history lesson. So I remember being in a church one time, and this preacher was up there, and he was just on a roll, and he's preaching, and he's all fired up, and he had mentioned the ancient Egyptians, and he admired them. And he said, in today's culture, that folks don't even think about the afterlife and heaven and hell, but the Egyptians, they spent their whole life thinking about it, and built the pyramids and all this. And he was extolling this as it was a virtue that the ancient Egyptians, unlike the Romans, who didn't really spend a whole lot of time thinking about or preparing for the afterlife. The Egyptians, the rich upper class, ruling class Egyptians, not the slaves, not the working class, not the indentured servants, but the powerful in Egypt, it consumed their lives. They built these massive pyramids, and put all of their wealth and everything for the journey to the afterlife. A lot of thought went into the afterlife. And he thought this was a great thing. And I remember sitting in that church listening to him. And at the time, I thought it was a great thing too. But I'm not so sure anymore. Let's think about this for a moment. So ancient Egypt spends huge amounts of time, money, resources. They use slaves to build those pyramids, to build the burial chambers where the rich and the powerful were going to go on their journey to the afterlife. I guess not many people thought about what was going to happen to slaves or indentured servants or whatever in the afterlife. But all of this was expended. All this time, money, effort, and everything was expended building these things, which still stand in ancient Egypt, or in Egypt today. They've stood for 3,000 years. Well, was that good? Was that a good thing? Let's think about this. Okay, all over the world right now, there are people from various American churches, all denominations do this. And they send out proselytizers. They send out missionaries. They send out preachers to these faraway lands to convert them to their faith, to say, hey, this is the good news. This is, and it doesn't matter what church they are. I mean, they all do this. All faiths do this. So in some of these countries, there are terrible things that occur within those countries, and I'm not talking about natural disasters. There's coup d'etats, there's military takeovers, there's communist revolution, there's a whole host of things. And when those things happen, and people on the opposing side lose the political contest, they're hunted down, tortured, imprisoned without warrant, horrible, summarily executed. These regimes go out and dig giant pits, shoot people, throw them in, horrible. And all this is happening while these representatives of the various faiths are trying to convert and proselytize. But they don't really concern themselves with this. I mean, they might pray for the people being tortured or killed. They might, in passing internally, say something to some of their fellow congregants and members of their faith about, what's happening in that country that they're in. But they never come out and publicly and go, "Hey, dude, you've got torture chambers. Hey, we're in this country and we're telling people about our faith, but these people are being murdered and tortured." There's no discussion of that. And they spend all of their time, like the ancient Egyptians, their time, money, resources, in preparing for the afterlife, in thinking about the afterlife. And so the guy down the street, that's being tortured and murdered, well, that's too bad. But we're focused on the gospel. We're focused on the afterlife. We're focused on getting these folks prepped for their journey. And they always come back to our lives are finite, and that our lives are brief milliseconds, and eternity is eternity. And that makes a certain amount of sense if you look at it from that perspective. But my problem with this, and that's what I want to get you to think about, is that I always thought that was, okay, or that was a good thing. That, thinking about the afterlife and, Starbucks coffee again, coming up. So I always thought, that was like a good thing. But I'm not so sure, because just like the ancient Egyptians, ignored the poverty, they ignored the issue of slavery, the treatment of women, the brutality. They were focused on, building these pyramids and, preparing for the afterlife. And not much has changed in 3,000 years. The religions have changed. The faiths have changed. But it's this still consuming, will we have to prepare for the afterlife, and all this other stuff. And there's nothing wrong with preparing for the afterlife. There's nothing wrong with having faith. My problem is that right now, as we speak, there are horrible things that are happening to people, or people are finding themselves in horrible circumstances or situations. But none of these organizations, none of these people that are members of these organizations are actually doing anything to alleviate that, to try to alleviate the suffering, to try to comfort those who are suffering. If you were to ask many of these folks who have been to these foreign countries and have, been on proselytizing missions and whatnot, and at the time when some of these horrible things are going on, and then you say, did you? Because I was actually talking. This is what kind of prompted this. I actually talked to a guy who was in the midst of all this, and it's kind of like, well, did you go and comfort any of these guys who were tortured? Oh no, we that's political. We don't involve. We were preaching the gospel. We prayed for them. It was awful. The guy down the street, they arrested him at 2 a.m. They thought he was a subversive because he checked out a library book, and they cut off his hands, and we prayed for him. We brought some food over to his way, but we can't discuss that, can't talk about that. We're preparing for the afterlife. We're getting folks ready to meet their maker. Well, there's nothing wrong with getting ready to meet your maker. But my point in all this, and that's what I want to get you folks to think about, is when it consumes you, and that's the whole focus of your efforts, is the afterlife. And yet all these other things that are happening right here and now in this world, on this earth, all of these things that are occurring, all these horrible things that human beings are doing to each other, that's just kind of ignored. That's just kind of, it's kind of, soft pedaled and well, yeah, that's terrible, and we're going to pray for them, but we've got important work to do. We've got work that concerns the afterlife. Jesus kind of spoke about this. It's kind of interesting. The more I don't know, the more people kind of get involved in this, the more they kind of get away. They think they're actually serving God. They think they're actually serving Jesus. But Jesus had, quite a bit to say kind of on this issue. And Jesus said, look, love your neighbor as yourself. Treat your neighbor as yourself. Are you okay with your daughter being drug out at 2 o'clock in the morning by the police because they thought she was a subversive? The authorities thought she was connected to a subversive group. She's assaulted. She's undergoes horrific torture. Maybe they execute her. Are you okay with that? Of course you're not okay with that. Your daughter. This is what's going on with your child. And Jesus said, look, if you feel pain, so does your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do you want to feel pain? Do you want to go through? Are you okay with this? Of course not. So why should you be okay? Why should you tell someone, well, I'm sorry that happened to your daughter, brother, but we can't discuss that. We can't protest that. We can't write an op-ed piece challenging the regime. We can't publicly go out and get in front of a camera and say, this dictator, these wretched people did this. We're focused on the afterlife. We're focused on the gospel. And Jesus said, look, love your neighbor as yourself. And so I just kind of see a lot of faiths, a lot of religions getting away from that. The more consumed they become, by the afterlife, just like the ancient Egyptians. And I'm not here to denigrate anybody's faith or religion or anything else like that. I'm merely trying to get you to look at something from another perspective. Is preparation for the afterlife important? Well, if you believe in an afterlife, yes, but to the exclusion of everything else in life, that's the question. That's the key. The ancient Egyptians were the ruling class, were consumed by this, of building these pyramids, and everything else was not of concern. The slaves, the treatment of slaves, the treatment of people in their society, none of this really registered to them. What was important was the construction of these burial chambers, the construction of these pyramids, and preparing themselves for their afterlife, preparing themselves to meet their makers. Well, you can debate whether or not their gods were even true. Were the Egyptians right about the afterlife? Were they right about their gods? I don't know. I mean, are people today right about what they believe and what they think? I don't know. No one's ever really come back, from the afterlife and gave us a tutorial. We don't really know. But all I'm saying is that we have needs right here. We have needs going on right now. And I'm just really kind of disturbed and by this, preparation for the afterlife to the exclusion of life on earth. Of real human beings that are going through awful things, and not earthquakes, not floods. As bad as earthquakes and floods are, people dragging you out of your home at 2 o'clock in the morning and subjecting you to horrific torture because you downloaded the wrong thing on the internet, or a suspicious thing, or they suspect you're part of a group, or maybe your uncle was part of a group. And you're just subjected to horrific torture. Your children are murdered, and this is what's happening today, in the midst of missionaries and proselytizers that are preaching about the afterlife. That's all I'm saying. Just something to think about. Is the afterlife a problem? I don't know. You tell me. And so, just another food for thought. Another video from Mr. Marty, telling you go out there and have a great day. And whether there's an afterlife or not, make this an awesome day. Take care, folks. Thanks.